we are live. So hey everyone, FusionEd coming at ya. And today, gonna mix things up and play around in the Unreal editor. I know a lot of people have been asking to look at this, and for the longest time, I didn't know it. I mean, if you look at my channel, like I'm mostly a Unity dev. But about a month ago now, a friend came over. We were talking about programming, and we talked about tools and how like as programmers, we shouldn't be limited to the tool set that we know, and should be able to use whatever we need to do our VR project. So like Unreal is great at like the super high fidelity stuff like Showdown, and so like it just kind of struck a nerve with me a little bit that like, hey, I don't know Unreal. There's use cases here, pros and cons. I should probably get a little bit of training in it. So been spending a couple hours every so often in the nights, like around midnight, just taking a look at Unreal, getting myself comfortable with it, and decided to share that knowledge with you guys. So if you have questions about like getting started or like what it takes, I mean, obviously having Unity experience helps like in moving to Unreal, but like I think it was really eye-opening for me a little bit to actually like be, hey, this is something very new. This is like how a bunch of other people are getting started with VR development. How is that process going? So if you have questions about that and just like if you're motivated, I think it's still very easy to pick up. And like there's a learning curve. There's always going to be a learning curve, but that's these engines. And yeah, just post a bunch of questions in the comments. I think the things that are really great about these streams is like not only me answering stuff, but like other people in the community. But that's just kind of practicing everything. And other than that, let me show you what we're going to be building today. I'm going to go ahead and hit play here. All right, so my controllers. So right now I just kind of have on this cube. So nothing terribly fancy. We've got Showdown running, so I'm not tied to. Oops, there goes my tracking a little bit. Come on, tracking. But yeah, I'm not tied to the actual flow of what's happening right now. And yeah, I can just press the trigger and can fly around the scene. That's dictated by where my controllers are pointed. And we can even interact with, whoops, I should move forward. I can interact with a bunch of these objects here and just gonna punch them around. Kind of like Superman a little bit, which I think is really cool. Move around, fly through the scene. So actually, I'm really surprised by how much stuff they actually put in here. It's a pretty gigantic scene, which I think is super cool. I'm gonna go ahead and press. There's the trash can I punched. But yeah, pretty gigantic scene. You can fly around all of this. I'm really surprised they put in so much fidelity in here, and it looks really great. We got a bunch of explosions pulling down on the scene. I'm just gonna go ahead and punch this guy back down. Just fly in for the end here, I think. Powering up, yeah. It's actually somewhat surprisingly long. You can actually like, fly into this car. See what it looks like from here. As he's about to take that final step. Oh yeah, I think that also. So that's Showdown, and yeah, it ends like right when Showdown ends. I didn't do anything terribly fancy to like control the ending or anything like that. It's actually pretty simple to do. So yeah, that's basically what we're going to be building. Might be a short stream. We'll see. Depends on how comfortable I am going through this. But yeah, let me get this thing set up. Let me go ahead and close this. So, and then I'll quickly go through this chat and like try to answer some questions. So to get started, we have the Unreal launcher. And to actually get Showdown, I think you go to the marketplace here. Showdown should pop up. I press enter. There it is. So you can go ahead and download it. It's kind of big. So I think like 2.2 GB. I already have it in my library since I was using it. So we're going to go ahead and create a project. Let's call this, I don't know, Showdown Flying Stream. And so it's for 412, and we're just going to hit create. So that might take a little bit of time. And while that's happening, let me go through these questions. So So yeah, I am a Stanford dude, as you can probably tell from my shirt. um, and yeah, Rabbit Hole VR. That is the name of the group. What's this? Eagle Flight. Yeah, Eagle Flight is by Ubisoft. I think it's a really cool, really cool way of like blurring it. We actually have a video on actually being able to blur the field of view as you're moving around. So I mean, if you want to learn, that's in Unity, not Unreal, but I think it's still super valuable. You have to tweak the parameters just right in order to actually get it to work, but when you do, it really does help with the actual VR sickness. That was the word I was looking for. Uh, Favorite Vive game to date? Ooh, that's a tough one. Favorite Vive game is probably got it's I think a toss up between Out of Ammo and Battle Dome. I really like I have mixed feelings about the latest Battle Dome update where it's basically Ender's Game in is I think it's King of the Hill is the name of the map, and it's like you can teleport onto the sides of surfaces like where the concept is like there's no sense of up, which is like the preface of like Ender's Game, which I think is cool that they kept to that fidelity. It gets very disorienting really fast, but I think it's still a really cool concept. I just kind of wish there were more people in there. That's all. Let's see. Slash stream. Never like CryEngine. What's that? I don't know. I have not tried CryEngine, so I can't comment on that. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Like I said, I don't want tools limiting me. And I have not played raw data. That is something I need to get my hands on and play around with. I think that would be. I've heard good things. It looks cool. Actually, before we get started here, let me ask a question on kind of what people's backgrounds are and how, like, are they more programming focused? Are they more artist focused, designer focused? Let us know in the chat. That just kind of helps us. I haven't played around with C++ and Unreal yet, but so like this whole stream is just going to be completely blueprint focused. But yeah, just let us know. I'm just kind of curious to see what people's backgrounds are and what gets them, I guess, excited about VR in general. I think that's something that's unique to everyone. Is super cool. So instead of touching the Showdown scene first, we're just going to go ahead and open up a new level. Yeah, new level. I'm just going to go ahead and use the default. And we're just going to do this to quickly blueprint our actual flying module that we're going to build. And then we can go ahead and dump that into the Showdown scene and modify it a little bit so that there aren't random issues that come up. But yep, this is the basic scene. There's the sky. I'm gonna go ahead and get where is this? I'm gonna drop this down to 5 just so it's a little. Actually, I'll drop it down to 1 just so it's a little less annoying to deal with as far as the grid is concerned. And the workflow with Unreal 4.12, which is what I'm on now, is a little different from Unity, although like the 5.4 beta just came out. But the nice thing about Unreal is that they have everything natively supported, which has some pluses and minuses to it, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But to get started, what we'll need is I'm going to create a blueprint class. I'm going to call it a pawn. And we'll just call this VR pawn. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And so this is classic blueprint. If you're coming from a Unity background like I was, the way I like to think about blueprints is they're very similar to prefabs. So like a prefab, you can assign a bunch of different game objects or objects. I don't really know what the name is in Unreal for this, but you can assign a bunch of different objects in this part here, the components basically. And then you can also add in a bunch of scripts and then tag in a bunch of variables. So very similar to a prefab, and then you can just spawn them into your scene. So I think that's probably the best parallel, I think, between the two engines in what I think. And so yeah, so just like a prefab, I'm gonna go ahead and add in a camera. We can call it VR camera. That's a thing. And I'm also gonna go ahead and add in, come on, Steam VR chaperone. So unlike Unity, like you actually have to define the chaperone. Let me quickly take a break and look through this chat. I'm just gonna pause back and forth every now and then just to make sure I'm hitting up everything. Developer, computer science, Steam VR template. Yeah, no, I'm not gonna use the Steam VR template just because I want to show, well, one, because I haven't even played around with it. Two, because I just want to show, like, just from scratch what it takes to, like, get something set up. As far as performance is concerned, I know it's definitely a bit more taxing on my computer. I know Unreal is definitely a lot more taxing, especially if you've tried the VR preview. I cannot, on my laptop that I'm running this on right now, I can't get the VR preview running. I'm running a 970M, and it's just the frame rate is trash. I'm hitting 90, or sorry, not 90, 20 FPS maybe, 20, 30 FPS. So it's very difficult to use. I mean, granted, I'm not using recommended specs, so I can't blame it too much. I know Unreal's targeting a much higher capable laptop, so that sucks, but I think that's one of the nice things about Unreal over Unity right now is that VR preview for editing stuff, but can't use it, which sucks. Let's see. Nice. Okay. So non-programmers and programmers, kind of a mix, which is cool. I mean, that's, I think, one of the beauties of VR is really like it brings in a lot of people together. And I think I was talking to Abdo a bit about this earlier, is that I think one of the things about Unreal that's like very different from Unity is that I think it's very Unreal is very focused on I think teams and AAA game studios, whereas Unity is I think a bit more focused on the indie dev. And the reason I say that is because the workflow with Unreal is like you can get like your high end or really deep back end programmers into Unreal and they can go ham on the C++ side of things. And then you can also have your artists in there that are playing around with blueprints. I think that it's a lot nicer of a workflow if you don't know any programming. For me, I find blueprints to be a little slower compared to like C sharp, but I think it's nice in the sense that it allows you to have those two factions that really go hand in hand together. I've think spreading the word about what you're because we're trying to get more people excited about it, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah, that's basically what these tutorials are about. Is really we just want to show people, yeah, exactly, really basics of getting started, and once you do, like, you can take it from there. This is more a means of like learn a little bit and then get excited to explore a lot more. That's really what we want to do with these streams, and I hope that's helping. You can let us know like what we can do better or like how to get more people excited, but that's the goal with these streams. Yeah, I'd agree with that, Tony. So yeah, so I guess moving back to the tutorial here, so now that we have the VR camera here, where is that thing? Where's the base eye height? That's what I want to change. Somewhere. Oh, maybe it's not here. There was a setting for base eye height, except now I can't find it. I'll find it later. But yes, there's the setting for base eye height that I want to set to 0. And okay, so now that we have VR camera in, I'm gonna also add in a capsule collision just to basically have that for any collisions that we want to do. And I want to set its height here to 96. This is what they recommend. I'm just kind of following along a little bit with the Unreal tutorial on how to actually go ahead and set up a VR camera. But like you can set this to however what you want. If you don't want collisions, you can obviously turn off the capsule. I think the radius they set here is 16. So just kind of using their recommended settings for that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is add in our motion controllers. So obviously, because we're using Steam VR with the left and right controllers, we're going to want to add that in. I'm going to call this left controller, and you can see here for the motion controller, it is set to left, and everything here is fine. And then I'm going to add in one more motion controller and then set that for, I can't select, right controller. And we're going to go ahead, set that to right. So that is pretty much what we'll need for actually controlling everything. We have the camera for the head, we have the capsule for our collisions, and then we have left and right controllers. If you want to actually add some visibility to your hands, because right now we don't have anything, we're going to actually add in a cube. There we go. I'm going to add in a cube for the left and right, just so that we can see them. Obviously, if you have actual models for the controllers or anything you want to use there, you can do that. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and put in some cubes just so that we can see our hands. 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. That might be too small. I can't remember what I actually used for. Let's also add in one more cube for the right controller. Let's call this right cube. I think 0.1 is too small, but we're about to find out. And so that pretty much does it for, oh yeah, I have to nest. Just make sure our cubes are nested to our controller so that they're actually moving along with them. And yeah, so we have Chaperone set up, we have VR camera, we have capsule, we have motion controllers. So let's go ahead and actually test this. Oh, first we gotta hit compile. Obviously, because we don't have any blueprints, there's nothing really to compile, but you have to do that for blueprints in general because they're tied to your code via blueprints. And go ahead and close that. And for this, I'm gonna get rid of player start because I'm just gonna throw this in here, and that just kind of controls where our camera starts. And I'm gonna switch this to VR preview, and so we can use our mouse here, or because we're VR developers and have headsets, we can also use our HTC Vive. So yeah, basics there. Let me turn on my controllers real fast, just so that you can see the cubes over there because my controllers are turned off. But they should, in theory, fly. Come on. Well, oh. I think this is where that base height. I missed that setting. Let me see if I can find it real fast. Ba-doop. World to meters. Okay, this one needs to be. Okay, this isn't details. I want to go. There it is. So I think this was the setting I missed. I don't know why I didn't see it in the blueprints, but that base eye height, we have the VR pawn selected and we're in the details panel here. So I'm going to go ahead and set that down to 0. And so that'll just basically, it doesn't lift me off the ground by, I believe that's 64 centimeters. Someone might be able to correct me on that, but I believe that's 64 centimeters. And we can go ahead. In theory now, I shouldn't be, I'm still flying. Why am I flying? Oh, did I not delete a camera? That might be a thing. Let me save this scene real fast. Let's call this VR scene. Or no, we'll call this first level. That's a good name. That's a better name. And okay, so let me zero everything out. Zero that. Oh, okay, and you know what I didn't do is I need to hit, I'll actually do this in the prefab, or not the prefab, in this thing. No, I'll do it outside. I changed my mind. But I want this, since we have a pawn, I want to auto-possess this pawn as a player as opposed to an AI agent. So that's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around a little bit why Unreal has this distinction. Again, someone in the comments can probably answer that better than I can. But I just want to make sure that I think Unreal has this distinction between like what you control as a character versus what you control as AI, which probably makes sense for a lot of games. But for our purposes, we just want to make sure our pawn here, it's going to be the sole pawn in our game, is controlled by us, the player, and the AI does not possess it. So hopefully, yeah, there we go. That is centered. Let me go ahead. I can stop. You guys probably can't see the chaperone, but I can, which I know sucks. But if you're following along, definitely can follow along with this. And we see our cubes. Perfect. So this is what I wanted, and we need to make sure those settings are correct in general. But at this point, yeah, that's the basic setup. Hopefully, I know someone mentioned there's like a Steam VR template, and hopefully someone, if you can link to that in the chat, that would be ideal, because then a lot of people can get access to that. That's something like, granted, like I've been spending like a few hours here and there, so I haven't explored everything in detail, but this is just to kind of get people started a little bit. And so yeah, so that's basics of setting up Steam VR from scratch. And so now that we have that, well, let's get started, I guess, a little bit with this flying module. And to do that, I'm going to create another blueprint class. And we're just going to make it an actor, and I'm going to call it flying. And so for this one, I'm not really going to add anything to the viewport, because this one I just kind of want to be pure code. And for that, so let's get started exploring blueprints. And so by default, when you create a blueprint, you get these 3 events that get started. So if you're coming from Unity, think of these like event begin play is your start method that you see in a C# script. Your event tick is the update method, and you get a nice one for on trigger or on collision when you get this overlap. And so yeah, so these are populated by default. Like with Unity, you can delete them or modify them however you want. And yeah, you can hack around the link just if you put a space in. Yeah, I know YouTube is not the greatest for like putting up chat. We're actually kind of, for our website, we're kind of working on a chat module that hopefully should be a lot better than YouTube's. But more details on that later once we actually have something working that we can share with people. But yeah, so this is kind of what we'll get up by default. Just like what I was showing before, we have our components here. We have, like, this is just standard like layout for Blueprint. You got the components. You have your event graph, and so each of those are the events that we can get. We have functions that we can create, macros, variables. So we'll be using variables, and then we can also dispatch our own events just like in C#. And then we can also look a little bit about details here. But for this, since we are working with, actually don't, I will want event tick. I don't want, I'm going to move event tick up here. But since we're working with Steam VR, I'm going to right click, and we're going to look, we're just going to type in this for get hand position and orientation. So if we zoom in a little bit on here, what we can see is we can get a global instance to our hand controller, which I think is really cool. We're going to copy that, so Control C, Control V, make another copy of that, and then we're just going to switch the hand to be right, and I think that pretty much does it there. I can't remember if I have to do controller index, but we'll test that out. And then the last thing we're going to want to do is get our headset position. So that's not headset, it is get tracked device. So by default, our headset is device ID number 0. So with those 3 things, we will basically have the position of our headset, and the positions of these guys. And just to kind of show you what we're doing here, this flying module is based upon actually work that was done a while ago now at Stanford's Virtual Reality Human Interaction Lab. And the core of it is basically, I mean, this whole stream is actually based on that, which it's, I think, a really easy way to show things off, and then it's also just like a cool experience in general. You can potentially get motion sick from it, so caution to that. I know this is a bit late in the stream to actually mention that, but something I haven't noticed too many people get too sick from it in at least the lab work I've done at Stanford, which I think is really cool, and it's interesting that that happened. But the core of it is you have the headset, so that's hopefully you guys can see this here, and you have these two controllers. And just like Superman, oops, I'll use my head as the headset. So imagine better idea. I'll put the headset on my head as it's supposed to be. So headset represents my head. We have the two controllers here. And so just like Superman, when we fly with our arms straight out, we fly in that direction. And as we fly out here, it doesn't really matter. And the basic idea is that we are projecting, our flying direction is based on the direction of this vector from my headset to the controller, and the headset to my other controller, and then the average of those two right in the middle. That's the direction we want to be flying in. And so yeah, so really simple math there. It's just a couple vector subtractions and vector additions to get that working. So to do that, what we're going to do is drag out this position. And actually, no. I'm going to create a vector subtraction. Oh, vector subtraction. I never remember the order, but I guess we'll find out if I'm going backwards. But I'm going to take our headset. Actually, I'm going to add a comment here real fast. Just add that on top of this. Just call this the headset. Left and right are kind of obvious, but headset I think is just kind of important to point out there. And we're going to go ahead and just drag this in, drag this in. So that's the power of blueprints, I guess. Is a lot of it's just dragging, dropping. So it's very friendly to, I guess, artists and designers who want to like kind of prototype something simple but fast, right? So without a lot of programming, I think that's one of the nice things that Unreal provides. And for the other one, so like we did this for the left hand, so we need to do it for the right hand now. So same deal, just drag our reference to the position there and drag a reference to the position there. And so now at this point we have the vector that's going out to this controller, vector that's going out to this controller. And now we just want to add them together to basically create the vector that's going to be our direction vector. That again, just type in add here, and then we find a vector plus vector plus. And for these, like the way you kind of work with the blueprints in general is a bunch of right clicking. Just put that out there. Again, just gonna go ahead, drag, and we have our vector. Cool. So now, that's gonna be, that's doing all the calculations for what our direction is gonna be. So now, the next thing we have to do is actually move ourselves in that direction. And we'll talk a little bit about velocity in just a second. But for that, what I'm going to do is look for add world offset. And it's not to that. Add actor world offset. So what we're doing here is this is basically just going to be moving us in a direction. So specifically, we can say we will change this, but for now we can take that direction vector that we just did and we move that into delta location. I'm also just going to tick the sweep here. So if you can read this really fast, either here or on your own, but it's whether or not we like sweep to make sure we're actually like jumping into something or not. So I'm just choosing to tick it on. The nice thing here is, I guess the way Blueprints works is you can, if it's like a simple primitive type, you can just like add the option into the blueprint. Or if you wanted like a variable, you could drag and connect that there. So that's what kind of what we're going to be doing with this target here. And so what we're going to do is actually just quickly go to our variables and add a variable. And this is just going to be our VR pawn. And we'll hook this up all in our level blueprint, but which I'll explain in just a second. But okay, I just noticed this question here. So the question is, why are you doing this in a different blueprint than the VR camera and controllers? And actually, I had this discussion with a friend at work the other day. But the reason I'm doing it in a different blueprint is because, and this, honestly, this may not be the best, like the Unreal way of doing it, but this is the way as a programmer I kind of think about things. Is you want to keep things modular, just like in programming. You want to keep things modular, and so flying is this thing that suppose we are in some sort of multiplayer scene. And you might not set it up this way, but suppose you're in a multiplayer scene where you have more than one Vive controller being activated, right? In that case, the way I would like think about things modularly is like suppose there's like different logic for each of the players, but like they still kind of have this core flying component to it. I'd want to just then hook up that flying component to each of those players as opposed to like having it kind of embedded in there. Or like if I need to tweak anything specific to each player, I could do that through a kind of a separate blueprint or I guess script. And yeah, this is me more thinking of things from a programming standpoint where I like to keep things modular. Again, like I don't, maybe other people will disagree and then like put all of the flying scripts and flying things into their own blueprint. For me personally, that would make things look a lot more verbose and like you have this gigantic screen full of blueprints flying everywhere. But I think that's really dependent on your own customization and your own way of programming. I don't think either way is wrong per se. It's some things may turn out to like work better if you have things modular. Some things might turn out better if you like combine everything. In this case, I prefer the modular concept, but yeah, I think that just really depends on your own style and like how it works into your workflow. But I think it's a really good question, which is why I bring it up. But yeah, that's kind of the long-winded answer to that. Yeah, there you go. There we go. And so yeah, that is the answer to that. And then going to the variables. So what I did was create a variable, and this is just like in programming, just like in anything. Variable is a value that we can change kind of on the fly. And so if we click on it, we've called it VR pawn, but it's actually set to a Boolean. So what we're going to actually do is go ahead and type in VR pawn, and we have a bunch of different things that we can do with it. I'm going to go ahead and get a reference to it. So this is what we're going to be setting up, but what I can do now is just quickly go ahead and drag our VR pawn into the blueprint, call get, and drag that onto the target. So now what that's going to do is whenever this setup is called, which we will touch in just a minute, but whenever this setup is called, we are basically going to move our player, which is represented by this VR pawn, by this direction value that we haven't scaled yet. It's very very like dry and bare bones, but we'll touch on it a little bit. And so yeah, so that's kind of what it's doing. It's just moving it in the direction that we want it to go in. And the last thing we have to do is actually make sure this is called every frame so that we're always moving when we want to move. And to do that, we're just going to take our event tick, which is our update function that's called every frame, and we drag that into this play looking button thing that just means you're going from the event tick event, and then the next thing you want to call is this add octa world offset. So that's basically going to do exactly what we want to do. It's going to add the world offset, and where does it get its data from? It gets its data from this system that we've set up. So that's the basics of it, and we're going to hit compile. And one of the nice things with blueprints, I guess, is that you're really unlikely, you might come across compiler errors. I'm not going to say you won't. But because of the way this thing's kind of set up, you're not going to have like syntax errors or anything like that, which I think is nice. But yeah, that's just kind of core of it. This is the very bare bones. We'll add a bit more to this as we go on. But at this point, we can kind of just make sure our flying is set up in here. Sorry. I'm so used to, in Unity, just dragging into the world outliner, but you can't do that in Unreal, which kind of annoys me a little bit, but minor detail. And so now it's not going to work, but I'll show you, but I just want to point it out by actually testing first. Oops, I hit play. Okay, so we're not flying around, nothing's happening. And the reason for that is we got an error. And so let's just open up this. But the reason is access, it's the very, very weird cryptic error of access none trying to read property VR pawn, blah, 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 blah. The reason for that is actually, not this one. We've set up VR pawn, but we haven't actually assigned a value to it. And the reason we haven't assigned it, it's VR pawn is there, but that flying script doesn't know where to look for that VR pawn. And so what we have to do is actually go into our level blueprint. And this is basically where we're going to assign it. And the way I like to think about the level blueprint, it's basically code that is attached to like the whole scene. It has access to your world outliner. It's basically thinking of your scene as another prefab that has access to a bunch of different things that you could have spawned dynamically, or as like part of thinking, I guess, of your level as another blueprint. It's basically the way I think about it. And yeah, that gets you this level blueprint. It's not a prefab, but it's like it's kind of a prefab, and it's yeah. Why it's set up like this, I'm not really sure, but that's just the core of it. And so for this, what I'm going to do is simply minimize this so that I can see my world outliner. And I'm going to get references to my flying script and my VR pawn. So just go ahead and drag those in. Now once we do that, what I'm going to do is, so what I learned like in the process of learning blueprints is like everything's pretty context sensitive. And so we're flying, and so when we drag off like this, it basically starts looking at methods we could use for flying. And so what I'm going to look for is set VR pawn. And so every variable like will have a setter and getter that we can do, and since we have a reference to our VR pawn, I can just go ahead and drag that in. And we have to make sure that this is set up, and I'm going to do that at event begin play, or event begin, yeah, the event begin play. I said that right. And so just hit compile. So event begin play is called, I'm actually going to delete this, but event begin play called at the beginning of the level. And it's just going to set on our flying script, it's going to set the VR pawn. So now if I hit play, I am flying. I'm already flying way too fast. Yeah, my tracking is not ideal in my room right now, which is why it's shaking a lot. I'm gonna, because I can't see what's going on really, because I didn't add in my, whoops, I didn't add in my checks. Okay, we're already flying. So yeah, okay, this is backwards. Reason I know that is because as soon as I put my, oops, cool. And the reason I knew that right away was simply because as I put my controllers down to try and go towards it, I started zooming the other way. Indicates basically that, yeah, this is backwards. Basically what we need to do is move the head to the bottom and then the controller to the top. So it's just order of operations really. So again, head to the bottom, right controller to the top. So hit compile there, and let's try that one more time. Hopefully, yeah. So now I think we're flying the opposite way. See, and now I'm flying up, straight towards it, exactly where I want to go. and whoosh. I'm flying really fast because I didn't scale anything. But nice thing about this is like you can get like a kind of zero vector if you like put your hands out kind of and spread them out, or you can like zoom around really fast and get to where you want to go. So got a lot of control, which is really cool. Whoops. All right. And so yeah, at this point, have a basic flying script, and we can control it, and yeah, that's really all there is to it. Let's just look at it again really fast. But event tick, we're just moving our character. So the velocity in our movement is not normalized, which means we're not moving at a consistent velocity, which depending on the look and feel, depending on how many better thing, if depending on how many users you want to share this with, it can be a good or bad thing. So if it's not normalized, you're accelerating a lot, could get a lot of people sick really fast. But it does add a lot to the immersion, I think, of like being able to go whoosh, 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 how you feel. So yeah, we can add a dead zone to this. So Robert, instead of a dead zone, what I'm actually going to do is we're going to code in, if you pull the trigger, you basically stop moving. That's just kind of the simple thing that I want to do. You could obviously add a dead zone, but yeah, you can customize this however you want, really. Dong Ho, what you could, so depending on how many people want this, we could, like, this is honestly, I'm planning this for like an hour or so we've got about like 20 minutes left. But if I usually my streams are about 2 hours, so if people want to see the Unity side of things on like how this would work, we could do that. But in 20 minutes, I think we can get through setting this up so that we have the basics of kind of whatever I showed at the beginning. To be honest, Tony, like, and I think you seem to be very knowledgeable in the Unreal side of things, but as far as I've honestly been a little confused about like why you would have player start versus just like putting your VR pawn in the scene. Like this is just purely me coming from a Unity background. Like I like just being able to see where my camera is and move things around. But is there maybe someone else in the chat can answer this better of like why you would use player start versus just you moving your pawn around? You sound knowledgeable. I'm giving you props for that. But yeah, so that's just kind of the gist of this. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add two things. We're going to add a variable to basically control when I press the trigger that we start and stop moving. And then the other thing I'm going to do is just normalize this. I'll show you how to normalize it, which is really easy. And then I'm going to leave it unnormalized and then just scale things down. So let me do that in the backward order of what I said it. So instead of adding this delta location in, what we can do is call normalize. So that'll normalize our vector, and basically just we get the direction we want to go in, and then we could have dragged this into our delta location. So that'll give us we go in whatever direction our controllers are facing, but we only are going at a fixed rate. So that's one way you can do it. I personally feel things go a bit too slowly if you do that, but that's my own preference. If you're building a really small demo, something like taking Showdown and flying through it, you can play around with the acceleration, but like that's something you can do to like keep the velocity straight and normal, so you don't run into this issue where your brain thinks that you're accelerating when you're not actually accelerating. That helps alleviate that motion sickness a little bit. So we can just drag that in and get things normalized. The other thing we can do, which is what I'm going to do, is actually just go and get we want a vector times a float. I'm just going to type in here 0.1. Yeah, there is a 0.1. Just zoom in there. And so this just kind of, right now we're just moving really fast through our scene, but I'm instead going to just scale things down by 1/10 so that we move a little slower and things are a lot more controlled. Point 1 is what I used in the demo I showed at the beginning, but you can play around with these values. You can combine these two together, so normalize and then scale it up so you're moving a little faster. When I tried this initially, I had it normalized and then multiplied by 5, so it's just chain these two together and then add that into delta location. But either way works. This is, at this point, it's, if you're following along, it's just experimentation. Find what works best for you and then play test. I was actually talking to a friend recently about play testing. It's like, yeah, that's actually really important in VR because you don't want to get people sick. So that's that. And for our next magic trick that we're going to do is we're going to add in a variable for isFlying. So isFlying is just going to be a Boolean, and what we're basically going to do is, again, just like the VR pawn, drag that in. I'm going to call get. And so this is basically what we're going to do is if isFlying is set, then we're going to call this add actor world offset. I'm actually going to drag this here to create a bit more space. Whoops. Oops. Man, I can't grab it today. So if isFlying is set, we're going to do this add actor world offset. If it's not set, we're not going to do anything. So for this, just going to drag here and then type in a branch. So branch is just your standard if-else statement if you're coming from programming. And so this is just a representation of that. And we have isFlying. It's already tagged into our condition variable, so that's perfect. And so we have our event switch. So what I'm going to do is actually, instead of dragging here, I'm going to drag into our branch first. So that basically means we calculate on our branch, check is isFlying set, is not set. If it is set, which is true, then let's drag into our add actor world offset. Not set, we're not going to do anything. So really simple there. That's all set up fine, nice and dandy. So let's go ahead and save that. Go ahead and compile. And if we zoom out, this is basically our blueprint. This bottom part here, controlling our calculations for our direction, and the top part just controlling our logic. And that pretty much does it for isFlying. Just save it again. And that covers that. And then the only other thing we have to do is go into our open level editor. And I'm going to have to add in our tick again. But basically, all we have to do here is just do a switch. Anytime either of these controllers pull the trigger, we need to now go ahead and switch that isFlying state. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and right-click, type in tick to get the event tick, and drag off here. We're going to get a property called a flip-flop, and basically it does exactly what you think it does. It's basically, it's already keeping track of a Boolean variable, and if it's just keeps flipping that every single time. And I don't want this on event tick. We'll fix that in a second. Actually, I don't want this on event tick at all. I changed my mind. Instead, what we're going to do is type in trigger. And so there are a bunch of different events for the trigger, but you can see here we got our motion controllers. I didn't notice that they had Oculus Touch also. But now that I noticed this, I'll just mention this real fast. So Oculus Touch, I think, is using the Oculus SDK. Motion controllers will work for Oculus Touch as well as the Vive because they're using the Steam VR SDK, which supports both. So something to keep in mind if you have an Oculus Touch and want to do both. But I'm going to go ahead here, do motion controller for left, motion controller, or sorry, not motion controller, I'm going to type trigger, and do this for the right one. And what we're going to do is, on pressed, we're going to drag into our flip-flop. And so that's, anytime we press, we're just going to flip that action. So it could be on the left or right, doesn't really matter. And then we're going to drag off from flying. And we're going to say set set, what did I call it? Is set is flying. Perfect. And we're just going to drag that Boolean that is being tracked by our flip-flop. And then regardless of whether it's that A or B, that's basically like, did we switch to A or did we switch to B? It doesn't really matter to us. We're just going to drag both of those into isSet. And that basically sets up our isFlying. So go ahead and compile there. Go ahead and save. And yeah, is there any like type of locomotion you're interested in? Yeah, I mean like Robert was saying, like locomotion depends on kind of what you're going for, but yeah, let me know if there's anything like, do you want like flying in Unity or do you want flying? There are a bunch of different options for that. I'll let you take your pick. But yeah, that's basically it, and we can hit play now. And at this point, I stopped tracking. All right, there we go. At this point, now turn my controllers back on. Should now see our cubes. There we go. And if I now hit fly, I'm flying. Everything's nice and controlled. It's based on the direction of where my controllers are. I can float like this. That works beautifully. I can swoop down, swoop back up. Fine and dandy. So yeah, that is the basic flying in the default level. So only thing we have to do now is really just add that into Showdown. And we've pretty much covered the basics of like getting our first project up and running, which I think is really cool. And so yeah, to do that, we're actually going to go into maps. Since we started with the Showdown package and everything, the scenes are located in Showdown in maps, and then you have 3 different levels. So the 3 different levels, and maybe someone else in the chat can answer this better, but from what I understand is Showdown is the main level that we're going to run. And we have 2, if we actually open up blueprints, 2 things that are called sublevels. The sublevels are the matinee map and the environment map. I'm not terribly sure. I think the way, I guess I understand that is in Unity, you can have multiple scenes, and then if you use, what's it called, scene manager.add additive, that just kind of combines the scenes together. So Unreal is kind of, I guess, you can do this through the editor using sublevels. And I think Unity is probably adding something similar. But that's the basic idea from what I understand what's going on here. Pre-Showdown, so we can open up. I actually haven't played around with exporting too much. So I can try to export, but that, yeah. Oh, as far as teleport, I don't know how to do all the parabolic teleport stuff in Unreal, but with Unity, Stone Fox has a really great plugin, the VR SDK. If you use that, I believe he has a parabolic teleport in there, which is, I think, super cool. I haven't played around it with myself, but you can get that and then play around with it in Unity, which I think is neat. But yeah, so we have the Showdown map. What we're going to do is just edit this guy. And since we have our prefab blueprints, whatever you want to call them really, depending on your context, we can just go ahead and drag and drop these guys. Just drag, drop, drag, drop. Click on this guy, move him up a little. That's fine. I'm just gonna, come on, buddy. Fine, I'll just type in flying here. Flying. I'm just going to set its position to 0, 0, 0, just because I like keeping stuff at 0, 0, 0. And yeah, that's pretty much that. I think one thing you need to do is there's this character, and so this character is what's controlling your movement through the whole scene. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete that guy. And I think that's all there is to it. The only thing, let's quickly save. And this one takes a bit, it's a bigger map, so saving things takes a bit longer. I'm actually quickly going to go into our first level and open up the level blueprint and copy all of this. So this is, again, all of the code that we need to hook everything up in our level. So we need to put that into Showdown. Go to Maps, go to Showdown, and open up their level blueprint, zoom out. So it looks small, there's actually a lot going on, which is behind the scenes. We're going to copy and paste that here. One thing you have to be careful about is that when you copy and paste that, you're only allowed one any event really. You're only allowed one of them in any blueprint. And so when we copy and paste, event begin play is already there, and it's running into this console command. So what we have to do actually is, instead of using custom event, we're just going to delete that. We're going to drag from here all the way over to there, and I think that does it. Yes, we have to drag all the way from basically following that chain of event begin play all the way into our set. So that's fine. And we also have two unknowns. So what we got to do there is actually find our references to our things. So flying, just going to drag that in, and then VR pawn. Just going to drag this guy in. So yeah, so that's the two references, and we can delete our unknowns. We don't need them. And just go flying goes to target, and then VR pawn goes to set. So I'll just move these things around. And and then flying goes to this target. And yeah, that should be it. And assuming I hooked up everything correctly, and the other thing I want to do is, we can test this, but the one thing is the actual workflow through Showdown is you have this sphere thingy with the Unreal logo at the very beginning. We're just going to disable that real fast, just because I don't like loading into that, because you get very disoriented really fast. But that's actually, all of the real code is in the matinee map, and it's all over this place, really. If I remember correctly, it's here. Yes. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and copy slow-mo rail matinee. I'm going to paste that over here. So nice and red, it says sequence begins here for the event begins play. Their startup screen 2 is actually their Unreal loading, but we can just switch that out. Nice and easy. I'm going to break that reference, break links. So now we're starting with that slow rail map that basically starts the scene. Go ahead and hit save, and then go ahead and compile. So, and then I think we don't need to delete those, but yeah, go. I'm off in the middle of nowhere, but that's fine. Okay, so, why am I off center? I'm away from my, let's see, I might have, there's the player start. We're gonna get rid of the player start. Again, I'm sure someone can answer. I mean, I know the player start is probably really good for some other games, like, I don't know, probably on mobile it's probably really good, but just for this, I think I personally prefer just this workflow of just, I know where my camera is, I want it to start there. That's just me. I'm sure that's different for a bunch of people. But yeah, okay, cool. I think my controller is somewhere. Oh, it's still off. What is back in there now? It's one of the things of just like using someone else's code is you sometimes spawn where you don't want to spawn. Let's see. Car flip, flying. Let's see. VR pawn there. Why am I spawning way back here? Got rid of player start. I got rid of the camera. The cubes are there. I believe that was all I needed to get rid of. Startup screen is right. I'm missing something somewhere. Let's see, what am I missing? There's a bunch of static meshes here, which is nice. There's the robot, we don't want to touch the robot. There's flying, which we don't need to touch. BP rotating logo, we don't need to touch that. I don't see any other camera or any reason why I would start all the way back there away from my controllers. The characters, but that's fine. Yeah, no, okay, I'm somewhat confused right now. Oh, right. I forgot I don't have these on the prefab. Yeah, I gotta do the auto possess guys and set this base height down to 0. There we go. That would explain it. Come on, I just want to add 0. I just want to type in 0. There we go. We can receive input. That's fine. Yeah, just make sure I guess those settings are correct. Something to point out. Hit save. Now in theory, I should be where I want to be. That looks right. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, yeah, we're gonna just need to delete that, but yeah, we can fly around, shoot through the air. I can hit the bullet. I can't hit it because there's no collision on that, but I can hit anything that has a collision, which I think is really cool. I can go sit with this dude. It's kind of weird to actually see some of the stuff happening here, but I really like this metallic stuff that's on here. I think it's this guy too. Cool. This guy. Stand here. Watch the bullets. Oh wait, did I just block a bullet? Because that's super cool. Yeah, I can block bullets. That's so cool. Yeah, because it's just even collision stuff. That's pretty neat. Like, it's like on collision, destroy stuff. It's so cool that you can actually like defend the robot or like play around with that. That's really cool. And yeah, like that's I guess just how this thing's been coded. But yeah, we can fly up. I'm having a little frame rate issues. That just might be my computer getting hot. Fly back. Fly in here. Start high to his face. That's sick. And I was totally not in camera, but but yeah, there you go. That's basics of just getting your first project startup in Unreal. There are a lot of, I mean, as far as workflow is concerned, if we're talking about Unity versus Unreal, there are, again, the player start issue. I think that's just meant for different games like mobile or console or something else like that, PC, whatever. I personally haven't found a use for it, but like that's just a thing. Got to make sure, like if you're doing what they're saying in the documentation, which actually I should also mention, I skipped a bunch of stuff in the documentation just because it works without it. It's like they talk about writing your own VR game mode and using that, hooking up your VR pun through that. I don't know. I don't find a reason to do that. I like this workflow of being able to know where my camera is and be able to change things on the workflow. That depends on you, honestly, what you learn, what you don't learn. My 2 cents. The other thing is just, I guess if you're doing this workflow, make sure auto possess player is set to 0. That's, as you've already seen, it caused me a few bugs, but making sure it's not AI. This camera thing, if you are on Oculus, I should mention this. If you are on Oculus, actually I mean I haven't tested personally with the Rift, but the base eye height might still need to be set to 64 if you're on Oculus, but on Steam, because they're using the floor as your 0, make sure it's set to 0. That's another thing. Make sure to add the chaperone. Yeah, that's basically it. I'm happy, like normally my streams run for 2 hours, so I'm happy to stay around, answer any questions, like as far as like getting started is concerned, as far as like how this would look with Unity. I guess the other thing I should mention, I've mentioned this on Reddit really briefly, but just to bring it up here, this is Showdown, so normally, and pros and cons, I guess, on Unreal. So normally Unreal uses something called deferred rendering, which is basically it's a more expensive form of rendering a scene that does all the lighting calculations after you've pre-computed the meshes, I believe. And it's I think the rendering cost comes at like a mesh level. I should double check that, but that's my basic under. In general, you get higher fidelity graphics at a higher cost. Showdown is actually written with the Oculus forward rendering algorithm, and this is forward rendering is basically it does all of its calculations on a light by light basis. So especially if you're doing baked lighting or just have very few real-time lights in general, it's very advantageous to use for rendering, especially in VR, because you just get a huge performance benefit from it. And so while yes, Unreal is normally written with a deferred renderer, you can use the forward renderer in something like Showdown to just get that extra performance out of your scene. And if you're using Unreal, I highly recommend looking into the Oculus forward renderer. I was looking at it with a couple of coworkers a few weeks ago. I believe it used to be on GitHub, but it got moved to like the Epic's GitHub branch. So you have to sign up, I think, to be an Epic member on GitHub in order to actually get access to it. But if you're starting out, yeah, I think so. This is the blog post for it. This thing gives you a 404 if you are not part of the Epic organization. And I think you just sign up for that. I haven't actually tried it myself, just because we're using Showdown, which already has it in. But yeah, this is you basically sign up for the Epic organization, and then once you do that, you should get access to that GitHub repo, which you can then. I haven't used the workflow, but I'm hoping it's simple and just works. So that's that. Yeah. Again, yeah. I guess if any questions, I'll stick around. Yeah, someone posted in the chat Stone Fox's thing, which is really awesome. He also has a YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. But yeah, I mean, if people want to play around in Unity with something like this, I can do that. I could also do it in a different stream if that's something people are interested in. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I'll hang around here for 5 more minutes or so. Maybe play some Hollow Ball for a little bit. Yeah, I'll take a quick break, and if there aren't any other questions, yeah. Unity, I have a button that I would like to be able to save as a prefab and use it in several situations. So yeah, I guess as far as Unity is concerned, so I think StoneFox's plugin does handle something like this, but the gist of it is if you're doing calculations where I'm assuming your button is kind of physics-based, so like if you have the controller, you hit it. But I can't because I have to specify the name of the script before. I guess are you doing it as a public variable? You can get things by reference by using what is it called? Find component by something. I forget what it's called. Find component. So you can do it dynamically. You don't need the reference specifically. As far as Unity is concerned, get component. So if you have the access to the game object, if you find that in your scene in some means, you can just call get component on it to get the button that you would like to press. Alternatively, like if you do the physics actions and like you can get when you hit something and then check if it is that object, that's something that I think should be doable. About controlling animations, slurping with controllers, pulling a lever, moving things along a path. So yeah, I guess I probably couldn't do the animation stuff in Unreal, but like in Unity, yeah. As far as like moving things along a path, yeah. I've been like looking. Actually, no, I haven't been looking. I've seen Newton VR and Stone Fox's plugin, so I believe both of those can handle it. I haven't played with them, so I can't make any promises on like how that would actually work. But as far as like interacting with levers or like moving along a path, yeah, I can show moving along a path. Like that's like in Unity, just use the animation clip to actually just like if it's all static, just to like move things along. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts on going forward with your own VR projects, sticking with Unity or transitioning to UE4? So yeah, I guess, well, let me say that louder, just so it actually captures both the audio. So Tony was asking, what are my thoughts on going forward with your own VR projects, sticking with Unity or transitioning to UE4? Um, so I think this really comes in, so personally, I guess. So my personal take on it is, if you have a tool, like if I had to choose between Unity and Unreal, I would choose Unity. The reason is I think it's, like I kind of hinted at the beginning of the stream, I think it's really good for indie projects, like small teams that know what they're doing. I think the learning curve is honestly a lot easier, um, especially if you're just like, this is not game engine specific, and I think Valve can fix this really easily. But like, if you looked at like what I had to do with the, just as far as documentation is concerned, as far as like just getting started with like putting Steam VR into your game, took a little bit of time to like make sure I hit all the settings right, made sure like the pawn was set up, made sure the base height was set up, make sure player starts and stuff was moved. Whereas Unity makes that really easy with like literally drag camera rig prefab from Steam VR into scene. Like that's just a win as far as like that's concerned. Unity is also nice because of the optimizations. You don't have to worry about optimizations as concerned. Like it will, like at its base level with forward rendering. Carmack mentioned like you must put in that aliasing. That's all provided. So that's a win on Unity's side. They're getting better with, I think I went to a talk 2 weeks ago now. Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago, where they talked about they're building in an input interaction system very similar to, I think, what you see in Unreal today, where it's like type in motion controller and it pops in there. So they're building something like that, which I think is really cool. So I think at some point they're gonna converge, but as it is right now, I think I would still, me personally, if you're just getting started, I think I'd recommend Unity. Um, there's just a lot of like smaller details you don't have to worry about, but I think it's personal preference. If you are coming from an artist designer background and you don't want to touch coding, like Unreal is a nice way like to do blueprints in a much more visual way. Like, I mean, Abdo can talk a lot about more about like what his experience is with that, and like not having to like touch the C++ or C# side of things. So as far as that's concerned, I think it's really nice. But I definitely think, yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it. It's a really long-winded answer. There are, I think, I think now, having actually played around with Unreal a little bit, enough to actually like make some simple tutorial like this, I can say like I'm gonna hold to like Unreal is nice for the desktop side, like with the rendering, but like the workflow is like really meant for teams. Unity is really meant for indie devs, and you can get the quality on both sides. So yeah, long-winded answer. It's like one of those conflicting things that keeps going on my mind. Like, here are a bunch of pros and cons. Like, what is the right answer? Not really sure, but my 2 cents. Let's see, try with Ben, $64 million. Yeah, it really is. Need help, PM, I'll let you know. This work cause, nuke, so blueprint kind of. There you go. Yeah, that's Abdo's 2 cents. And like, yeah, it's really, I can't. I can tell you what I like. Someone else can tell you what they like, but it comes down to like what works for you, what makes more sense intuitively for you, understanding yourself really, and then going ham with it. Obviously, like I strongly hold to the notion that you shouldn't let the tool dictate what you have to do. Like you should use the tool that you want to use. So, or like that's best for the work that you're going to do. Like you wouldn't use a hammer to put a screw in, which is a weird example. I don't know why I went there. But the point being, like, having both tools in your asset is nice and allows you to do some cross compatibility and things. And like, oh, I really want the high fidelity graphics. Let me go with Unreal. Oh, I really want a nice workflow that works with a small indie team, maybe Unity. I have a big team of artists and programmers. Let's go with Unreal. Like, that's the thing you want to be thinking about. Like, think about what tool works best for your work, and then pick it. Like, no, I don't think you should be thinking which tool do I know, and then I guess force that onto something. That's my 2 cents. Um, my game maker for Unity. Playmaker. Actually, I've never used Playmaker. But I've heard it's nice. I mean, it's not supported by Unity per se, so I don't know about that. Could you show could you somehow show us the workflow differs and is easier? How would I show that? Easier for individuals teams. So like, the reason I say easier is you're talking about the difference between C++ and C Sharp. So C++ is Unreal's language, C Sharp is Unity's language. And the core difference is with C++, you have to do a lot of memory management by yourself, where C Sharp is very similar to Java, where it does a lot of the memory management for you. And what I mean by memory management is, suppose we create an object in memory and we tinker around with it, do a lot of calculations on it. At the end of our calculations, we need to make sure that we delete it. And so that's just a lot of extra code, a lot of things. Your code starts to get bloated is basically what happens, because you're doing a lot of extra work that something like C Sharp is already going to do for you. And anytime you start bloating code, that just makes it a lot more difficult for different individuals to take a stab and actually like look into the code. And so with C Sharp, since it does a lot of that like low level stuff for you already, the code tends to be a lot shorter and easier for people to kind of work on the core design principles. The benefits obviously with C++ is that you can, in the Unreal workflow, is that you can take that, chuck that into blueprints, and you just have a few variables that are accessible. And which is what I understand. I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding. It's like you basically show, you can create, let's pull it up. You can basically create a node like one of these guys that's represented by C++, but then expose a few variables and in and out parameters that an artist or designer can then just throw that into a blueprint and then say, hey, this works. So as far as that workflow is concerned, like, that's nice. And that's kind of what I mean by like teams versus individuals. Like if you have like a few individuals that are all kind of designers, know the code a little bit, I think that works really well with Unity. For teams of like people with a lot of different backgrounds, maybe Unreal I think works a little better. Linear programming background, no coding, so blueprint system is really nice. Yeah, like exactly. So like say Tony, for example, like really wants to use the blueprint side of things and like contributing to like the basic design background, the basic art background. He can work in blueprints while someone at a lower level can like write the C++ code for say like maybe networking or something like that. So yeah, that's it. You can do both coding in Unity. Yeah. So blueprint. Yeah, I personally don't recommend doing Playmaker. I don't think it's like super optimized. I've also heard blueprints aren't super optimized either, but since it's supported by Unreal like internally, I think that's a little nicer. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Robert's explanation spot on. It's basically, yeah, you create an object, you got to delete it, otherwise you're using a bunch of RAM on your computer that just makes things go slower, and it's a pain to really track down where things like debugging just gets annoying. That's smaller amounts of code mean debugging is less of a problem. That's basically grandiose statement of things. um, yeah. So yeah, um, I think at this point probably yeah, I think I'm just gonna skip on the Unity side of things. I kind of mentioned in the description, like, but if people want it, I can make a video tutorial on that later, or something to that effect. I don't think there's any point in actually doing it on the stream. So I'm just gonna go ahead and close the things here, but I will stick around in the chat for probably another 5-10 minutes as I'm kind of like tearing down things, but just to answer any questions or anything like that. You can also post those in comments. And yeah, I mean, as far as like future Unreal streams or like future stuff in general, you can always post that. I think the ideal place to post that is on our website. So if you go to, there's a link to that in the description at fusevr.com there on the forums for suggestions. So it's a nice place to just like, for us to just keep everything synced up and aligned on what people want to see. Uh, you might see more Unreal stuff. I'm not sure. I have mixed feelings about the engine, just as far like as an indie dev, like I like Unity, but I think it's still really cool to like see this is stuff you can make that's really looks really nice in Unreal. But yeah, other than that, like if you found this useful or like want to share this with friends, that'd be awesome. And just liking the video or subscribing really lets us know that people want to see more of this thing. But other than that, yeah, this has been FuseMan, and I'm signing out. See you guys later.